Hey there, friend. Richard G's on the move again. Taking steps to clear the mind, leaving worries far behind, where every path feels like home, and you never walk alone. It's a welcome, open space, lit by kindness, filled with grace. Yeah, everybody get to know Jesus' name. Everybody gets to know Jesus' name.
So, if you take a 5-year period, right, a massive megachurch with about 3,000 attendees is going to bring in roughly 112 new believers.
Right.
But a tiny neighborhood church of just 51 people, over that exact same time frame, they will bring in 32.
Which is pretty incredible when you think about it.
It's wild because mathematically that tiny church is just absolutely crushing the megachurch in per capita impact. I mean, their conversion rate is just through the roof compared to the giant stadium down the street.
Yeah, it really is.
So it kind of begs the question, why do we automatically assume the giant building, the one with the traffic cops and the overflow parking, is the one with God's ultimate blessing?
Well, I mean, we assume it because we're heavily conditioned to read success through a very specific modern lens. Like, we really like things to be visible and quantifiable.
Right, something you can just neatly categorize on a spreadsheet.
Exactly. Which works perfectly if you are, say, looking at a corporate profit and loss statement. The revenue line goes up, the analyst points to the graph, and you know you're winning.
Yeah, it's very black and white.
But you step into the world of modern faith culture, specifically looking at how we evaluate churches, and that spreadsheet just completely falls apart. You're suddenly navigating these really diagnostic muddy waters.
And that is exactly what we are unpacking today for you, the listener, on this deep dive. We're taking a really hard look at a subtle, but honestly incredibly pervasive assumption in modern faith culture.
Right. The idea that church size simply equals God's blessing.
Yeah. And to do this, we are drawing from a really robust stack of sources today. We've got data from Barna and Lifeway,
Which are basically the gold standard for this kind of research.
Exactly. 2 of the leading research firms tracking faith and culture. And we're also looking at studies from church growth expert Tom Rainer, some global metrics from the Natural Church Development Project, and we're doing some close readings of the original biblical texts themselves.
Because we really want to get to the root of this.
Right. Because our mission today, whether you're sitting in a massive mega campus this weekend, or a tiny congregation of 30, or even if you're just, observing this entirely from the outside, you have likely felt the gravity of these success metrics.
Oh, absolutely. The cultural noise is just deafening. I mean, in North American evangelicalism specifically, the default setting is that a bigger audience automatically means you're doing something right.
Right. Size equals success.
But when you bypass that cultural noise and go straight to the source material, specifically the biblical texts, evaluating a church's health by head count is, well, it's historically and textually baseless.
I really want to look at that textual disconnect, actually, because it is fascinating to me. There's no, thou shalt have 1,000 attendees commandment anywhere in there.
No, not at all.
Yet the pressure to grow is just immense.
Yeah, I mean, look at the book of Revelation, right?
Yeah.
Jesus evaluates 7 different churches in Asia Minor.
Yeah.
He sends them letters, basically giving them this diagnostic report on their health. And the criteria are really striking. He looks at their faithfulness, their love, their endurance under pressure, their willingness to repent.
Right, all very internal metrics.
Exactly. Like for Ephesus, the critique is that they lost their first love. For Laodicea, it's that they're lukewarm and reliant on their wealth. Never once, in any of those 7 evaluations, is their weekly attendance or the size of their building even mentioned.
Wow. Not even once.
Not once. The ultimate scorecard has absolutely nothing to do with scale.
So I look at that and I really have to ask how we got so far off track. I mean, if the original scorecard is about endurance and love, how did we end up with a scorecard that basically mimics a Fortune 500 quarterly earnings report?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, It happens because the things that drive rapid, explosive growth in a modern context are the exact same things our consumer culture naturally gravitates toward.
Okay, meaning what exactly?
Well, we see massive growth driven by, like, a teacher's incredible charisma or highly polished concert-level music, or even exceptional children's facilities.
Right, the stuff that draws a crowd.
Yeah. And because those tactics actually do work to draw a crowd, it creates what the researchers call a superiority complex in larger churches.
Oh, okay.
The unspoken attitude becomes, we have more people, therefore we clearly have more favor from God.
Yeah. And the real tragedy of that superiority complex is how it completely dismisses the reality of where those people are actually coming from in the first place.
Yes.
Like, let's bring in a corporate analogy here to unpack this. If a massive tech conglomerate comes along and simply acquires a dozen smaller local tech startups, it looks like massive growth on paper.
Oh, definitely.
The stock price jumps, the CEO gets a huge bonus, the headlines are talking about this booming company, but they haven't actually created any new market value.
Right. They didn't invent a new product.
Exactly. They just bought up what already existed and moved it under their own umbrella.
Which is exactly what the Barna and Lifeway data reveals about the vast majority of church growth in America right now. The researchers actually call it transfer growth.
Let's talk about that. Explain the mechanics of how they track that, because it's not just an assumption, right? They're actually looking at the origin of these attendees.
Right. It's hard data. The researchers survey the new members of these rapidly growing megachurches and ask them a very simple question. Where did you attend before coming here?
Okay.
And the overwhelming majority answer that they were already attending a smaller church across town.
Wait, really? The majority?
Yes, the vast majority. They moved because the megachurch had like a sleeker youth program or a more dynamic speaker, or honestly just because they wanted the anonymity of a larger crowd.
Wow. So it looks like this explosion of new faith. The parking lot is full, the baptistries are busy, and everyone is celebrating this massive kingdom expansion.
Yeah, but it's an illusion.
Right. It's just reshuffling the deck.
Yeah.
You aren't creating new converts. You're literally just centralizing the existing ones into a single zip code.
Exactly. The building gets bigger, sure, but the overall number of believers in the city hasn't actually changed at all. It's a consolidation of resources, not a true expansion.
Okay, but if we know that the big, impressive numbers are mostly just believers migrating to the church with the best coffee shop in the lobby,
Right.
we have to look at where the actual new growth is happening. Like, where are the genuine conversions taking place? The people who were previously entirely unchurched and secular.
Yes. And what's fascinating here is that this is where the data from the Natural Church Development Project and Tom Rainer just completely flips the cultural narrative on its head.
Let's hear it.
The findings consistently show that smaller churches, specifically those hovering under that 100 to 250 attendee mark, have a vastly superior per-person efficiency in reaching and retaining completely unchurched people.
Okay, I want to go back to the math from the beginning of the deep dive, because I actually want to push back on this challenge a bit for the listener.
Sure.
You have the small church of 51 people bringing in 32 new converts over 5 years,
Right.
and the megachurch of 3,000 bringing in 112. I honestly struggle with this comparison, because at the end of the day, 112 people whose lives are transformed is still a significantly bigger number than 32.
It is.
So aren't we just punishing large churches for having a bigger... 112 rescues is a massive win, right?
It is a massive win. And to be fair, the sources are very careful not to dismiss the absolute numerical impact of large churches. They absolutely lead in total visibility.
Right.
But you have to look at the per capita impact if you want to understand the actual mechanics of how human beings change. A church of 51 bringing in 32 new believers, that's a conversion rate of over 60% relative to their size.
Wow. Okay.
But a church of 3,000 bringing in 112 is a conversion rate of less than 4%. The impact per attendee completely plummets in a massive crowd.
But why? Like, why does it plummet? What is biologically or psychologically happening in that smaller room that makes it so much more lethal, in a good way, obviously, to a secular mindset?
It really comes down to the mechanics of relational evangelism.
Mm.
True conversion moving someone who is highly skeptical or entirely outside the faith to a place of genuine belief. It rarely happens because they watched a polished monologue from the back row of a dark stadium.
Right. That's more like a concert.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That might get them in the door, but it doesn't keep them there. True conversion requires a breakdown of personal barriers. It requires sitting across a table from someone, drinking coffee, and having the actual space to ask really difficult, vulnerable questions.
And you just can't mass produce that level of vulnerability.
You cannot. Smaller settings naturally force human connection. If a skeptic walks into a living room with 12 people, they're going to have a conversation.
Yeah, they can't hide.
Right, they're going to be known. But if they walk into an auditorium of 3,000, they can very easily remain a spectator. And this is totally backed up by the global data in our sources.
Oh, really? What does the global picture look like?
Look at the places where faith is exploding right now. Parts of Asia, Latin America. It almost universally starts in small, underground house churches.
And the way those house churches scale is totally different than the Western model, isn't it? Like, they don't go out and raise $10 million to build a bigger warehouse to fit everyone.
No, they multiply through division, kind of like biological cells.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, once a house church reaches 20 or 30 people, they don't rent a hall.
Right.
They split into 2 house churches.
Wow.
They preserve the intimate relational container because they know that intimacy is the actual engine of genuine conversion. Even in highly secular parts of Europe, the research shows that depth and relational discipleship matter far, far more than dramatic crowd.
Okay, but if the data across the board, from Barna to these global trends, proves that small, intimate, relational depth is mathematically better at reaching the outsider,
Yes.
why do American churches spend hundreds of millions of dollars building environments that are basically designed to entertain the insider?
This raises an important question. And to answer that, you have to look at how a 2,000-year-old story has been completely, fundamentally twisted.
Okay.
We need to look at the parable of the lost sheep.
Ah, yes. You find this in Luke chapter 15 and Matthew chapter 18. The setup is pretty simple, right? A shepherd has 100 sheep. One of them wanders off and gets lost.
Right.
So the shepherd leaves the 99 in the open country to go hunt down the one. When he finds it, he puts it on his shoulders, comes home, and throws a massive party.
It's perhaps the most famous rescue story in the biblical text. But the context of why Jesus actually told it is everything.
What was the context?
Well, he was actively being criticized by the religious elite, the Pharisees, because he was having dinner with tax collectors and people deemed sinners. The religious establishment was essentially saying, why are you wasting your time with those outsiders when you should be catering to us, the insiders?
Oh, wow. So the parable is actually a direct rebuke to that superiority complex we talked about earlier.
Completely. It's a massive rebuke. But over time, modern church culture has subtly twisted the meaning. Sometimes it gets interpreted to mean that the found sheep, the one who wandered off, is somehow more special or like a VIP because of the dramatic rescue.
Or I think even more commonly, the church operates as if the 99 who stayed behind are the VIPs.
Yes, exactly.
Like, they are the loyal customers, they pay the bills, they volunteer. So the church's primary job is to keep them happy. You know, make sure the worship music is in the exact style they prefer, make sure the sermon isn't too challenging, make sure the parking is convenient.
And the sources point out that both of those readings just entirely miss the point of the text. The shepherd doesn't leave the 99 because they are less valuable. And he doesn't rescue the one because it's some superior breed of sheep. The point is that every single sheep has infinite equal value.
Okay, let's build out an analogy here to really visualize the mechanics of this. Think of an emergency room in a major hospital.
Okay, I like that.
The waiting room is full of people. You have folks with sprained ankles, minor lacerations, maybe a bad flu. They are all valuable human beings, and they all absolutely need care.
Right, they aren't unimportant.
Exactly. But suddenly, the paramedics kick open the doors and roll in a patient in full cardiac arrest.
The triage protocol kicks in immediately.
Right. The attending ER doctor drops whatever chart they're looking at, leaves the waiting room, and sprints into the trauma bay.
Yeah.
Now, the doctor isn't abandoning the people with sprained ankles because they hate them. The people in the waiting room aren't second-class citizens. They just aren't in immediate danger.
And when that doctor uses the paddles and brings that cardiac patient back to life, the entire hospital staff celebrates.
Yes. They celebrate the rescue. They don't celebrate because the cardiac patient's life is worth more money than the guy with the sprained ankle. They celebrate because someone who was dead is now alive.
That is the exact mechanism of the parable of the lost sheep. Heaven rejoices over the one not because of superior worth, but because of the joy of the rescue.
That makes so much sense.
And this presents a pretty devastating critique of the modern megachurch model. when it becomes hyper-focused on the 99.
How so?
Well, when a church pours 90% of its resources, its budget, and its staff time into keeping the waiting room comfortable, providing warmer blankets and better magazines for the people with sprained ankles, they lose the capacity to run into the trauma bay.
Wow. They stop caring about the one outside in cardiac arrest. They literally lose the actual mission, which is the rescue.
Exactly. True blessing in church health isn't measured by how many safe, comfortable sheep you can pack into a single climate-controlled pen. It's measured by your willingness to go out into the dark for the one.
If we accept that, if we remove the focus from the total head count and refocus on the urgent need to reach the one in danger, it fundamentally changes the architecture of how a community should be built.
It really does.
It moves the focus entirely away from the square footage of the building and places it squarely on the foundation.
Which brings us to the final textual source for today's deep dive, Matthew chapter 7, the famous teaching about the two builders.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah. One builds his house on the rock, and the other builds his house on the sand.
Right. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew. I mean, everyone who grew up in Sunday school knows the song.
Oh, for sure.
But let's look at the actual architectural engineering of what is happening in that text. A church that is built on the shifting sand of cultural metrics, on entertainment value, on the sheer force of a pastor's personality, on being the most relevant place in town, is essentially pouring a very wide but incredibly shallow slab foundation.
It can hold a massive crowd on a sunny day.
Yes, but it has no depth. And when the storms hit, and the text guarantees the storms will hit, that shallow foundation just shatters.
Absolutely.
Those storms could be a public scandal with the leadership. It could be a massive cultural shift that makes the church unpopular. Or, honestly, more commonly, it's a personal tragedy in the life of a church member.
Right.
Their marriage falls apart, they get a terminal cancer diagnosis, or they lose a child. You cannot lean on a spectacular laser show or a witty 20-minute sermon when your life is completely imploding.
You can't. The shallow foundation just cannot hold the weight of human suffering. The rock, as defined by Jesus in the text, is the exact opposite of that shallow slab.
What is it then?
The rock is hearing and doing the words of Christ. It's obedience. It is deep personal discipleship. Think of it like driving steel pilings deep into the bedrock.
And as the research from earlier showed us, smaller churches have a natural structural advantage in driving those deep pilings, right?
They do, mainly because of the mechanics of accountability.
Okay, unpack that.
Well, in a massive room of thousands, the architecture actually protects your anonymity. You can slip in during the second song, sit in the dark, and slip out before the final prayer.
Nobody knows your name, let alone your struggles.
Exactly. You can maintain a completely shallow, consumer-level relationship with the divine.
But you put that same person in a circle of 10 people in a living room on a Tuesday night.
Everything changes. You cannot hide in the living room. If you don't show up, people text you to ask where you are.
Yeah.
If you are struggling with a secret addiction, or your marriage is strained, the people sitting 3 feet away from you are going to see it in your eyes. That forced vulnerability and relational accountability is the only soil where actual bedrock discipleship grows.
But to be clear, the sources aren't suggesting that large churches are inherently bad, right? Or that they're doomed to be shallow.
Oh, not at all. A megachurch can absolutely drive those deep pilings into the bedrock, but it requires a very specific, agonizing choice from the leadership. They have to stop chasing size as the ultimate scorecard.
Which is incredibly hard to do in our culture.
It is. They have to completely decentralize. A large church builds on the rock by aggressively funneling that massive weekend crowd into small, intimate groups.
So they have to kind of shrink the church intentionally.
Yes. They have to prioritize deep biblical literacy over easily digestible, shareable sound bites. And most importantly, they have to focus on sending mature people out to start new works, rather than hoarding all the talent and all the people in their own seats just to keep their numbers high.
Right. They have to view the size of their congregation as merely a tool, not the goal line. Because whether you are leading 50 people in a rented school cafeteria or 5,000 people in a state-of-the-art broadcast campus, the mandate is identical.
Completely identical.
Make disciples who love God, love others, and walk in obedience. That is the rock. And it takes immense discipline for a pastor to look at an empty seat and not view it as a failure of their own leadership, but to instead look at the filled seats and ask the much harder question, are the people in these seats actually transforming?
It really requires a complete rewiring of the pastoral ego. You have to trade the dopamine hit of a packed room for the slow, unglamorous, decade-long work of watching one individual slowly change their life.
Man, when you pull all of these threads together, it totally shifts the paradigm.
It really does.
I mean, we've looked at the illusion of transfer growth inflating our numbers while the city around us remains unreached.
Right.
We've seen the hard mathematical reality that intimate relational vulnerability is far more lethal to a skeptic's defenses than a polished stadium event.
Yeah, the data is clear on that.
And we talked about the triage urgency of the parable of the lost sheep, reminding us we can't spend all our resources keeping the waiting room comfortable while the cardiac patient dies in the street.
Exactly.
And finally, the architectural reality that a wide, shallow foundation of entertainment will inevitably collapse under the weight of real human suffering.
The scorecard was never about how many people you can get into the building. It has always been about what you are doing with the people once they are there.
Such a crucial distinction.
It moves faith away from being a consumer product that you passively watch and returns it to a relational commitment that you actively participate in.
And as we close out this deep dive today, I want to leave you, the listener, with a thought to carry with you this week. It's a question about your own trajectory. If the data clearly shows that deep relational accountability is where actual lasting transformation happens, if the living room is mathematically more effective than the stadium, what would it look like if we changed the questions we ask each other?
I love this.
What if we stopped asking, where do you go to church? And started asking, who are you growing deep with? In an era where you can stream a flawless, high-definition megachurch sermon on your phone from anywhere on the planet, maybe the most revolutionary countercultural act of faith you can take isn't joining a bigger crowd. Maybe it's committing to be fully known in a smaller circle.
In the spotlight, the voices rise high. Charisma calls and the crowds multiply. Stories shine bright, the stage lights glow. But is the teaching clear, or just the show? We chase the numbers, count every seat. My house is bigger, God's blessing is sweet. Yet the shepherd still leaves the 99 to find the one who's lost in time. Not by power, not by might, but by your spirit and your light. Build better, not bigger, Lord, on the rock we stand. Firm foundation in your word, not shifting sand. The broad path may draw the crowd, but the narrow way leads home. Every soul is precious, the 99 and the one. Build better, not bigger, make us your own. Small rooms gather, hearts open wide, deep in scripture, where true life abides. Conversions quiet, disciples made, not transfer growth in the grand parade. From the megachurch lights to the house church prayer, the question remains, are we building with care? Not the size of the flock, but the strength of the ground. When the storms are raging, will we still stand? Not by power, not by might, but by your spirit and your light. Build better, not bigger, Lord, on the rock we stand. Firm foundation you. Heaven rejoices when the lost one returns. Not for the numbers, but the heart that learns. Whether 50 or thousands, the mission is clear. Make disciples who love you, walking in fear. No superiority in the seats we fill. Only faithfulness that does your will. Dig deep in the truth. Let your word be the base. Build better, not bigger. By your grace. Build better, not bigger. Lord, on the rock we stand. Firm foundation, your word, not shifting sand. The broad path may draw the crowd, but the narrow way leads home. Every soul is precious, the 99 and the one. Build better, not bigger. We are yours alone. Build better, not bigger. On Christ, the solid rock we stand.